Good afternoon. Thank you all for showing up. So before I get started with this, I'm going to preload this a little bit. At the end of this presentation, we're doing a mini raffle, not the one that was just up on the screen, a mini raffle right here for the presentation machine, okay? Which is not super new technology, but it's sufficient to run 3 VMs and the presentation, so it's not nothing. So we're going to talk about that when we get to the Q&A section, and I will give this away at the end of the presentation. You get the computer, you don't get any of the screens. Those are all theirs. That's not yours. So let's talk a little bit about tmux. Now, some of you might be saying, what is this? It sounds like some experimental drug you see ads on TV. It doesn't sound good. It's what's called a terminal multiplexer. It lets a user in a single terminal window do multiple windows, manipulate those windows, do a lot of stuff within a single SSH or console session. It's very useful, especially if you're in a place like you're on a server that's not working correctly, you're on a TTY, you're on a VMware session, and you don't have a full desktop available. It can be really useful. And it's also excellent for if you're on a limited connectivity to a remote machine and you might get cut off. It's super useful for that. I'm going to explain a little more about that in a minute. So about me, I got a nice introduction already. I've been using Linux for a long time. I'm an AFF guy. If anybody wants the slides for this, and you'll notice the slides are all in glorious text because this is a text utility, so the slides should be in text as well. So those slides are available at murphnj.neocities.org. And you might think, hey, that sounds like the old GeoCities with all those horrible web pages. Yep, this one's going to be bad too. So there are good ones. Mine is not one of them. And if you have questions, you can email me, not during the presentation, but you're here, so that's not a problem. But if you have questions afterwards, you can email me at murph@weirdness.com or contact me on the Fediverse with Mastodon or whatever other program you like at murph@gardenstate.social. So how to install it. I'm going to get into some of the details of some of the other stuff later, but how do you install it if you wanted to install it and follow along with this? Most versions of Linux have it in the regular repos. It's very easy. Red Hat, if you're using old Red Hat, it's yum install Linux. If you're using anything modern, it's DNF install tmux. Did I say Linux? I did say Linux. tmux. What's that? Yeah, it just aliases it over. On Debian or Ubuntu, apt install tmux. Arch is similar. Pacman -X S tmux. Slackware had it in the default install for me on the Mac. You need to use either Homebrew or Mac ports, whichever of those is your preference. So brew install or port install tmux. If you're doing this if your Linux you're using is through WSL, sorry. But what you would use is whatever Linux distro you're using within WSL, you would install it through that. Windows does not have that natively that I have seen and when I looked into it. So to get started with tmux, you simply type tmux at a terminal prompt, okay? And what it does is it pops up another terminal prompt, looks just like it did before, except at the bottom you'll see there's a status bar with some information in it, and there's some useful stuff in there. This is your basic screen. Now you're within a tmux session. If you want to do something, if you want tmux to do something for you, you need to hit a command key before you to sort of bring its attention to it. So that command key is Control-B. When you hit Control-B, the next character you type will go to tmux as opposed to your bash shell. So I'm going to just demonstrate that quickly. So I have a screen here. I'm just going to type you know what? I'm going to SSH somewhere first. I'm going to do SSH Alma. Yes, and I think on the top and bottom too. Bear with me for just a second here. Let me resize my window. How are we doing? We look okay on the left side? Nothing exciting's happened on the right anyway, so it's over the edge. That's okay. So we're going to run tmux within our Alma session. Now you look, it just popped us back to another bash prompt, which is fine, because that's how it's supposed to work. You can see on the bottom it says bash, because that's all we're running. On the right, you see alma.example. Now I do want stuff on the right. You know, I spoke too soon. There is stuff happening on the right-hand side of the screen. It has the time and date. I forgot what was over there. The time and date's over there. So that's useful stuff if you have multiple windows open or you're not sure which one you're in. So we're in tmux now. So if I do Control B and the question mark, it pops up our help. Obviously, if you were just in a regular bash shell, you don't get that. This is tmux's help. And if you're frightened by all of that, yeah, I kind of get it. There's a lot of options in there. I'm going to talk about that later. And I'm not nearly talking about all of those options, so don't panic. So let me not get ahead of my slides here. So here's the feature that initially drew me into the screen and tmux, what the heck is a terminal multiplexer world, okay? You're working on a system, you're on your laptop, on Wi-Fi, all of a sudden you have to close your laptop and walk somewhere else, so you're losing your network connection, okay? Ordinarily, if you had just SSH'd into that machine and you didn't do something to accommodate it, you would lose, when you drop that connection, you would lose your connection and you would lose all the work you're working on. If this happened unexpectedly and you can't prepare for it, there's nothing you could do about it. This is something that's great about tmux. tmux continues to run on your machine, even if your session is interrupted. So let me demonstrate. So we'll start something, nothing important, but if this was an important running task, there it is, it's running. Now let's say something happened, and I'm going to hit that and say, oh my goodness, you don't want to, yeah, sure, okay. So now we've lost it. Ordinarily, what happens to that process that's running? It's gone. You can't do anything about it. So we're going to open this up, and I'm going to try to size it for the screen, which I did not anticipate, but we work with it. So I'm going to SSH back into that machine. And now I'm going to do a command. I'm going to do tmux. Now remember, I had already started tmux. I'm going to do tmux A, which is going to attach us to an already existing tmux session. Now, you can name all your sessions so you can have more than one. We're going to keep things simple and just do one. You can do tmux A, and it's going to attach to the first running session, of which there is only one. Boom. Now, you notice the program I was running, when I abruptly disconnected it, is still running in the background, and we pick up right where we left off. Now, for me, from what my purposes were, this was enough to sell me on this. Okay, I'm in. This is awesome, you know, because I did that a lot. You know, I had problems like that a lot. This is great. So that's the first feature. And like I say, for me, I could have closed the book right here. But it does so much more. It does other useful stuff. So let's go back here. So now, if you know you're disconnecting your session, you know, SSH sometimes is a little funny. If you just disappear, sometimes it'll hang out there. If you do Control B, D, it disconnects your screen session as if it were dropped. But then you can exit your SSH session cleanly and get out. So if you know you're going to do it, you can cleanly get out of your tmux session and then come back to it later. You don't have to quit it. You could tell it, yep, you keep running in the background. I'm going away. I'm coming back later. So super useful. Like I say, you can name your sessions. I don't really get into that in this talk, but if you say you want to have a couple different sessions running, you can absolutely do that, and it works. Oh, by the way, little interactivity. If you have questions, feel free. I might hold them off till the end because we're going to have a Q&A at the end, but if you're lost and you need a quick, just let me know.
Can you change your control keys?
Yes, you can change your control keys. I talk a little bit about configuration later, but I don't go too deep into it, but I'll cover that more. The answer is yes, and we'll talk about it more later. So here's a useful feature that you might like. So you know what? I'm gonna exit. Nah, I'll leave it on here. So we can do multiple windows. So right now we have one big window with our stuff. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open a second one. So right now, actually, I should have left btop running. So btop is running. What I can do is Control B and then C for create. Notice it pops up another one. Now, if you didn't know otherwise, you might not know what's going on. So let's just, get a couple things on the screen here. That window is just sitting in front of our btop window. So if I do Control B, N for next window, btop is still back there. So now I can have two bash shells running simultaneously and just connect to them as if you were in two separate terminal windows. Is it working? Okay. So that's a useful feature. Let me see how far I got ahead of my slides, which I always do. Oh, okay. No, I'm not too far. I get all enthusiastic and I start running. So Control BC creates a new window. Control B, P, and N switch to the previous and next window respectively. I only have two, so they're not going to look all that different from the demo that was there. You can also do Control B and a number for at least the first 10 sessions, and then you will move to that one directly. So if you have 5 windows open, you can go from 1 to 4 by hitting Control B4, and it brings you to the 4th one. They start with 0, but you can all deal with that. You're Linux users, you could deal with that sort of thing. Okay. So split panes. So we can have separate windows that you switch between, but what if you want to see a couple things side by side? Let's go here again. Let's do Control B, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the % key, which is going to give us a vertical split in the lines. And you see now the window on the right is active. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open a different machine over in that window. And let's do a horizontal. Let's do Control B and then the double quotes. Now we've split that window in half. So let's do, okay, and I'm going to move around between these windows. I'm going to do Control B and the right arrow, and it's going to move us to the window on the right. And you'll see it's not super easy to distinguish, but we have different colored lines. So the green line shows us that the one to the left is active. If I go Control B, you could see the one on the bottom right is active because it's the one that's got the green outline. It is not the easiest to discern thing, but it's still there. So let's do another split. Let's go crazy and make this all silly looking. So we'll do that. Terminal height's too small for BTOP over there. So let's do, I don't know if I alias that back. Oh. I don't have a key in that direction, but that's all right. So I'm going to move up to this top one, and I'm just going to leave that sit there. So you can see we have one SSH session, and we are into 4 different VMs, and you can jump between them and do whatever you want, monitor what's happening on all of them. Useful? So let's see. Again, ahead of my slides. So Control B quote does it horizontally. Control B % does it vertically. There are that help page that had 18 zillion commands. There are all kinds of commands to change your proportions, to move the partitions around. There's a lot to it. We're gonna get to a little easier way to do that. You can move between panes with Control B O. If you only have 2, that means the other one. You're on this one, go to the other one. Or you can use Control B and the arrow keys. That's how I was negotiating with the 4 different splits. You can get rid of a pane with Control B X, and you can convert a pane into a window with Control B and the exclamation point. I don't know why I wrote out bang there. It might have not looked clear when I looked at it otherwise. So let me show you another neat feature. This might be useful. This does not replace your orchestration software by any stretch of the imagination, but may be useful in some circumstances. Let's go back to our example. So I'm going to go into command mode. So I'm going to do Control B, colon. That puts us in command mode. You see how the bar at the bottom turned yellow? So I'm going to do set synchronize panes, and it does tab completion. Thank goodness, because synchronize is tough to type. So now it looks like nothing happened, right? But now if I do, it happens on all 4 at once. Yeah, you do have to type the commands correctly if you want things to happen. It doesn't fix that for you. So there you go. There's our 4 separate VMs. Well, 3 VMs and the host machine. I actually SSH'd back from a VM into the host. So, like I say, this doesn't replace Ansible because, of course, if you do RM, -RF, and one of those machines is in a different directory, things might not happen the way you expect. This could go poorly for you. But for some things, this may be a useful feature. And to undo it, by the way, which I'm going to undo, back to command mode, and you just do the same command again, and luckily it keeps command history within your session. So now it's off. Now I'm only typing in 1. That's a neat feature, but dangerous? Yes. So that goes into all visible panes. Copy and paste. So has anyone here, this is the example I brought up in the intro. Has anyone been at a TT, you have a machine and it's supposed to come up to a graphical interface, but it comes up to a TTY. And now you're trying to solve things. You have your username and password. You're like, oh, it didn't work because there's a wrong UUID in fstab, so it doesn't boot fully. And all I have to do is copy a 32 character UUID of random characters from one place to another, and I have no cut and paste. Anybody else been there? I've been there. It's a pain in the butt. tmux, if you have enough of a system to get tmux running, tmux has its own copy and paste things. I've used this. I was in a VMware environment previously, and we used to do that. The VMware console, oh, it's great, I can get in. There's no copy and paste out of it. You're stuck. So I found this. Thank goodness. This is a fantastic feature. So within your tmux session, there's a copy mode with Control-B, left square bracket. I'm going to botch one of these, by the way. It'll happen. Control-B, left square bracket, puts you into copy mode. Then you select your text with Control-Space. Then you use you use the cursor keys, get to where you want to start, hit Control-Space, do your cursor keys to outline your text that you want, and then do Control-W to clip it. Then you can go to another window or pane or somewhere else on the same screen, and you do Control-B, right square bracket, to paste it. That's a little different than screen. This is one of the differences with screen. So it used the same key to start and stop your highlight.
Does this word wrap, or are you selecting a rectangular region?
That's an excellent question. I'm pretty sure it word wraps, but we're going to find out in 1 minute. Yeah, because I don't remember which it does. We'll talk about searching the buffer afterwards. Let's go on a journey of discovery here. So we're going to do, which one am I in? Okay. So we're going to do Control-B, left square bracket. I hit Shift first, and I move these around. So I'm going to try it again. Control-B, left square bracket. Now I'm in copy mode. I hit a wrong key. So let's go up here, and let's find out which one it does. So I'm going to do Control-Space. I've made that mistake before, by the way. The curly brackets do something else, and I don't know what it is. I didn't do the square bracket. I did the curly bracket. That was my typo. So let's see. It does word wrap. There's the answer to your question that I did not know immediately. So let's go a little less extensive. We'll just get the shell out of here. Control-W to end that clip. And let's play a little bit. Control-B-O, we'll go to another one, and we're up here. Now I will do Control-B, right square bracket, without Shift this time, so things happen the way I expect. There you go. There's your paste. So on this graphical machine, it would be easier to use the mouse and just cut and paste. But when you don't have that luxury, this can be a lifesaver, at least for me. So I found that to be a really useful feature in a number of circumstances. There is also, now one thing that, did I hear a question? No. There's one thing that is a little bit funny. When you're in this, you can no longer like scroll up with the mouse to go through your buffer, but copy mode is a way to get through it. So if you do your Control-B left square bracket, you can now scroll up through as much buffer as tmux has. Now, it has a lot more than that. It's just that's where that session starts. So that's why it ends that quick. So to scroll back into the history, you use copy mode to do that. And there are other features in copy mode which you usually don't get, particularly if you're on a more limited terminal. If you're on GNOME terminal, you could search your history. With this, you can actually do, I've already done Control-B, left square bracket. You can use Control-S to search forward for a string, but more useful, because you're usually at the bottom of the page when you start this mode, you could do Control-R to search in reverse up through your history from your tmux session. So usually you start at the bottom. So I'm already in mode. Control-R, I forgot it while I'm sitting here. So we'll do Control-R, search up, because that was in the fortune that was run there. And there you go. You could see it searched up backwards through and has already highlighted that. And if you hit Enter, you can actually do the next one. It'll go through your entire history for each successive version of that. All right. Going through this much faster than I thought. So we will have plenty of time for questions. Oh, went the wrong direction. So Control-S forward, Control-R backward, and N goes to your next occurrence. And again, I'm not nearly covering every feature of all of these. This is a tiny scratch of the surface of what tmux can do. So mouse support, you can actually get some limited mouse support. Now, of course, you have to be on something graphical that does this. If you're in a TTY, mouse support probably isn't going to work out for you unless you have already loaded mouse drivers for your TTY session. I forget the command for that, but you can get it. But if you're in a situation like this, what we're going to do is we're going to do set-G mouse on. After we go into command mode again, Control-B, colon, set-G mouse on. Now, I should be able to do things like, this mouse is a little funny, glitched out. Ooh, I can change the divisions between these. Now, there are commands to do all of this if you're not in a position to do the mouse, but that's a useful feature. And there are some right mouse button menus. Control? No. There are some other features within mouse mode. To tell you the truth, I don't really use mouse mode on this a lot. You know, when I'm using tmux, it's usually because I'm in a command line world and I need more functionality. I've usually left the mouse behind by the time I get this far. It does, however, work in PuTTY. If you're going from Windows machine to a Linux machine, the Windows mouse stuff will work within PuTTY for that, just as an aside. Oop. So mouse support. Oh, so talking about configuration, we're back, Morden C, to your question. Configuration. You can, when I was doing research, now I was using tmux and I was doing stuff, but then I did some research to get a little more information. I went through so many guides for tmux, and they're like, okay, here's tmux. Here's how you remap all the keys. And I'm always like, why are you leading with that? What does this thing do? What's our purpose? Because apparently lots of people don't like the default key bindings. I agree with them on some of them, but I just deal with it because I work on a lot of different machines, so I don't want to count on my configuration being the way I like it. tmux's configuration is insanely rich. You can change nearly everything. If you think, can I change this thing to, yeah, you almost certainly can. It's in there. And there also that command mode, where we set stuff like the mouse and we set synchronized panes, is also very powerful. And as I was going through research, I found that someone, one of us, one of our types, actually wrote a compiler in the configuration and the command mode of tmux to prove that tmux itself is Turing complete. Okay? That's a journey of discovery. Okay? So if you think, can I do this in tmux? The answer is probably yes. If you want to write a large language model, you probably can. It's probably not a great idea, but sure, you probably can do that. So that's pretty much, I don't get into the configuration of it because, like I say, I tend to run it straight up and I just deal with weird key combinations. That's me.
It's worth pointing out the default key configurations are designed purposely not to conflict with them.
No, you are nearly correct. They are set to not conflict with Emacs, actually. Yes. Control-A is a big no-no in Emacs, so the Emacs folks get all bent out of shape with screen. This was done that.
It was also designed to be able to be nested within screen with the...
Was it designed to do that, or was that just a happy circumstance? I was going to mention that later.
I remember reading it was design decision so that you could run them because the keybind was separate.
Yeah.
But who knows? I don't remember the source, so I can't say for sure.
I thought Emacs was the driving factor behind it, but people didn't like Control-A.
Yeah.
So we got Control-B, and I'm fine with that. And that is a good byproduct. I'll circumvent one potential question coming. People say, can I run tmux on my machine and then SSH into a machine and run tmux over there too? You go, oh, you can.
Yes, but no.
You can, but you're treading into dangerous ground of not being able to control something. So if you want to do that, running screen on one and tmux on the other is a real easy way to circumvent that potential problem. You can, like on your remote machine, change your key bindings over there and avoid it, but you could run screen over there and make it work. So, okay, so I am pretty much done with the formal part of this. Too quickly, but that's very on brand for me. Sorry, I was raised by New Yorkers, and the more familiar I get with this, the faster I talk, and I get through it very quickly. So tmux is a super powerful tool. If you're living on the command line and you're remoting into machines, give it a look. It really does a lot of useful stuff. And I'm saying that, I'm just showing you how it works. I don't get a commission for tmux. You know, take a look at your leisure. If you want to contact me for questions afterwards, we're doing questions now, but murph@weirdness.com, on the Fediverse, on either of two accounts, gardenstate.social or Hackerstown Murph. And the slides are up there again as well. So I'll open it. Oh, and before we start with questions, if I can get my help her up here for a minute. So I'm giving away the presentation computer. It is a Core i3 of undetermined generation, I think generation 1. It's got 4 gigs of RAM. It is not a computing powerhouse, but it is enough to run 3 VMs and the presentation at the same time. So it can be something if you are here and you like Linux, but you don't have a machine that you can do it on, this is the perfect thing for you. If you'd like a low-end machine, here you go. No money, just come up, ask this fine gentleman for a ticket, and I will generate a random number and give it to somebody, I hope, because I don't want to take it home. It's got 4 gigs of RAM and a fairly new 256 gig SSD, so performance is really as good as it's going to get with this. It's not terrible. You've seen it. It's not, you know, it's not dying. I'm not doing it. I'm not running Crisis on it. You know, it's all text. But, you know, it is what it is. And you get a keyboard and a mouse and a power cord. You do not get my video cables. You cannot have those. I need them for other things. I have all these weird adapters to plug into this. Those you can't have. So, while I'm answering questions, please come up, take a tip. Please, somebody, come up, take tickets. If only one person does it, I'm okay. We got people. So good. Okay, now I'll open it up to questions while we're distributing, and then we'll pull a number.
Thank you so much. I'm going to ask 2 questions so he doesn't have to bring me the microphone twice.
Sure.
First, I assume this is built on N curses or something like that, or
I do not know
did
what
they
it is
just go
built
to
upon.
ANSI escape sequences and skip curses?
I'll bet it's built on one of those, but I don't know that it's necessarily on curses.
Okay. The other thing was, as someone who's used Screen for years and didn't know about tmux, is there a relationship that's causal between those 2 systems? Did one come first?
I believe Screen came first. tmux, I believe, was later on. People saying, hey, we can do this better. I used to get questions when I did the Screen talk, so why don't you use tmux? Screen is old. It's like, they both do most of the same things. The Venn diagram of what they don't do, you know, the circles are very close together. There are only a few things on the fringes. If you need to do the serial port stuff that Screen is really cool with, tmux does not do any of that stuff.
Gotcha, but if it's Turing complete, you really need to use tmux.
Yes, if you want to write your LLM in it, yeah, you got to use tmux. And tmux, if you set up your panes in your windows all sophisticated, and then you detach and reattach, Screen loses all of that, tmux keeps all of that. So if that's something you do frequently, tmux is probably the better tool for you. If you're doing serial port stuff, Screen is absolutely essential for that because tmux doesn't do it. Other than that, most of the stuff in the middle, use whichever tool you're happier with. It's not, I've heard people say Screen is too bloated, use tmux. Okay, you know, if you're at a point where a couple of $100K is going to make the difference, sure, go on economy, but for most people, use whichever one you're more. If you like Control A better, then use Screen. You know, it's not a big distinction.
I had a couple of real comments more than anything else.
Sure.
Screen, I'm pretty sure predates tmux by quite a while.
Oh yes, absolutely.
From what I've seen of its capabilities, it goes back to when you had to use a serial terminal to connect to a machine.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah.
Actually, that's not its exclusive thing, but if you need to do that serial port stuff, Screen is an awesome tool for that.
Yeah, and tmux struck me as a bit more modern interpretation. So the other thing is when I transitioned a few years back, about the first thing I did was I remapped Control B in tmux to be the Control A for Screen. And had muscle memory, and it seemed to be easier, and I'm not an Emacs guy, so that's that.
Hey, if that makes life easier for you, go for it. tmux gives you nearly unlimited configuration options. Map it to whatever makes you comfortable. Anyone else? I thought I saw another hand somewhere.
Any other questions?
Behind the pole behind you.
I was wondering if you can say anything about on how tmux works using Vim. I know someone talked a little bit about that last weekend in Seattle, but I didn't know if maybe you would have anything to add on.
I do not know of any conflicts between tmux and Vim. It would be news to me. Yeah, I've never had any problem, but I'm not a super heavy Vim user. So possibly there's cases that there's a conflict that I've never run into. But I unfortunately don't have any information for you on that. If there are, hey, shoot it to me in an email. I'd be interested to know, and I'll try to look it up. But if you find the answer you're looking for, feel free to email it to me or send it to me on the Fediverse. I would be interested in that. I wasn't aware of any. Anyone else?
Okay, so suppose I'm using tmux on this laptop just because, oh, I like a setup where I've got a SQL window open in half of the pane and like I arrange this. Does that survive through reboots?
No.
Okay.
No, it's a program that's running in memory. So
Right.
it'll survive you disconnecting. It'll survive the reboot of, well, if you're running it locally,
Right.
no, it will not survive a reboot.
Okay.
If you were running it remotely and your laptop rebooted, your remote session would stay running.
Right,
But
right.
yes, if you're running it locally and you reboot your machine, no, it's a process
Okay.
running in
okay.
memory.
And it doesn't have like a save to.
No.
Okay.
No, it's not at that level. That you can do, but it would be a new session with the windows the way you like them.
I just had a quick comment. There's a lot of configuration that you can do with tmux, but that I don't want to do with tmux. So if you search GitHub, there's a lot of people who have done that configuration stuff for you. Oh My Tmux is one that I personally have used, and I like it a lot. It just adds some like battery management stuff to the screen at the bottom and things like that. So I just wanted to shout that out.
Yeah, my primary use for this is at work and for doing some of this stuff, and it's always on different machines, so I don't bother configuring it. I just roll with the defaults, but that's me. If you want to configure something, believe me, can I configure? Yes, you can, because you can configure everything.
Anyone else?
More questions? This is way quicker than I was thinking. Questions, comments? No questions on the command line presentation software that I was running? That usually comes up too at some point. Okay, it's called MDP, Markdown Presentation, and it renders your Markdown into slides, but it does not do word wrap. So if you'll notice at the end of my lines, words are mercilessly cut off at the sides. And someone said, can you fix that? I'm like, no, not that I know of. I looked through all the settings, and I didn't see anything that says cut words off cleanly, so, or hyphenate or something. No. If there is, let me know, because I never found it, and I just said, well, you know what, I'm going to have to deal with ugly edges. But it's a useful thing. I used to use one called TPP, but it wasn't supported under anything. If you'll notice, I'm running my presentation from the Debian VM because it's not packaged in Fedora or Red Hat. So I circumvented this by just going, well, okay, Debian has a package. I'll just SSH into the Debian machine and run my presentation from there. Oh, and whoever wins this doesn't have to download the slides because they're already on here. So if you want the slides really bad and you didn't want the computer, you could still take a ticket and you will get a copy of the slides. Are you serious? It took 20? Holy moly. Okay. So, any other questions, comments, criticisms, innuendo, anything? No? Okay, so I'm going to go back to the screen where I had this. So I'm just going to, that look random enough for everybody?
Yes.
Thank you. The silence was killing me there. Okay, so we've got, if it does 30, I'm going to have to do it again because you've got the 30 there.
I think I gave away 30 by accident. I've got 29.
Okay, if it hits 29, I'm going to do it again. So we've got 1 to 30 minus 29 in the mix. Actually, I should make you take it since you're holding 29. 16. Come on down. Okay, despite the fact that that's the end of what I had scheduled, I'm more than happy to go over anything else. I will give this gentleman the passwords, which are really so super secure, you have no idea. Any other questions about tmux or old machines or weird command line presentation software? I am game for it. Just hit me up. I'm happy to talk about it. Thank you all for attending, and thank you for your patience.